exports has over the decades evolved into a dynamic and diversified special economic zone. From a cluster of early manufacturing units, MEPZ has grown into a vibrant industrial ecosystem supporting sectors ranging from engineering, electronics to services and emerging industries. It has played a significant role in driving exports, generating employment and contributing to the industrial development of Tamil Nadu, Andaman and Puducherry region.
More importantly, MEPZ has continuously adapted, transitioning from an EPZ framework to the modern SEZ model, aligning with policy reforms and responding to changing needs of global trade and investment. This evening, therefore, is not just a celebration of longevity, but of evolution, resilience, and continued relevance. We gather under the theme, Future of SEZs, Enabling India's Next Export Growth Wave, a theme that is both timely and forward-looking.
At a time when global trade is being reshaped by shifting supply chains, technological transformation, and evolving policy frameworks, special economic zones are once again at the center of strategic economic thinking. The focus is no longer just on exports, but on integration with global value chains, domestic markets, innovating systems, and emerging sectors. Over the past 43 years, MEPZ has evolved from one of India's earliest export zones into a key contributor to the region's export strength, industrial growth, and employment generation.
This evening is not only a celebration of that legacy, but also the launch of a new chapter, one that reflects ambition, adaptability, and alignment with India's next phase of economic growth. As part of this milestone, we are also very proud to introduce the MEPZ Foundation Day lecture series, envisioned as a platform to bring together leading voices in policy, industry, and academia to shape the discourse on trade, investment, and competitiveness. To formally commence today's proceedings, I now invite Mr. Alex Paul Menon, IAS, Zonal Development Commissioner, MEPZ Special Economic Zone, Tamil Nadu, Andaman and Puducherry region to deliver the welcome address.
Good evening and greetings to one and all present this evening to celebrate MEP's 43rd Foundation Day. I extend a very warm and respectful welcome to our esteemed chief guest, Sri Anantha Nageswaran, Chief Economic Advisor, and Sri BVR Balasubramaniam, former CEO of Niti Aayog and former Commerce Secretary to the Government of India. Sir, we thank you from the bottom of the heart because you could adjust your personal schedule to come here and honor us. We are grateful for that. I also extend my sincere welcome to all the distinguished officers from various departments of the state government, the central government, ADGFT office, customs, GST, consulates, along with industry leaders, stakeholders, and all our valued participants gathered here today for this special occasion. So, honorable dignitaries, distinguished colleagues, and industry leaders and stakeholders, it's a privilege to address you on this Foundation Day of the Madras Export Processing Zone. As one of India's oldest multi-product export processing zone, established in 1984, I can just reminisce of one of the oldest photograph, of how the zone was at the very start, between two hillocks, a barren land in 1984, and to see what it has transformed into. And now MEPZ stands as a pioneering institution in the country's export-led industrial growth. It was envisioned as a gateway to channel foreign investment, enhance exports, and create employment through world-class infrastructure and policy support. Today, as we reflect on 4 decades of this remarkable journey, MEPZ's story can be seen as a progression of vision, resilience, and transformation. Because we have gone through 4 decades, we thought we'll just capture the milestones on a decadal theme. So the first decade from 1984 to 1980 was the foundation and early growth stage, where we had an initial investment of around 671 crores, attracting over 30 units, beginning with units like May or Polypack Private Limited. The focus was largely on garments, textiles, with strong participation of women in the workforce. And the second decade, from 1990 to 2005, had a huge expansion and policy transformation with the economic liberalization in the 1990s. MEPZ entered into a crucial phase of rapid growth. Exports reached 1,377 crores in 2004-05, supported by improved infrastructure, policy reforms, including its transition into an SEZ in 2003. And the third decade, from 2005 to 15, is where we saw large diversification and scale, where the entire TAP region, as we call the Tamil Nadu, Andaman, Pondicherry region, was marked by diversification and scale following the SEZ Act of 2005, during which several new SEZs were established. Investments rose to 41,400 crores, and the cumulative exports crossed 68,000 crores annually, with the emergence of sectors such as engineering, shipbuilding, ITITS, along with India's first free trade and warehousing zone. This period also saw key institutional and procedural developments, including the establishment of the Unit Approval Committee, the Board of Approval, the Zonal Development Commissioner's Office, and MEPZ Authority. And the last decade, the fourth decade, from 2015 to present, is focused on modernization and global integration, where the TAP region has witnessed significant growth, with exports reaching 2.26 lakh crores in the financial year 2024-25, and the cumulative investments reaching to 80,000 crores in 24-25, and employing over 6 lakh people, highlighting its very strong socio-economic impact. And if I have to speak about the Madras Export Processing Zone, the central government SEZ alone, it continues to be a key contributor within the ecosystem, currently hosting 118 units across sectors such as electronics, computer hardware, and ITITS. In 2024, MEPZ alone recorded exports of 7,400 crores and provided direct employment to over 40,000 people, reinforcing its position as a leading export hub. What defines MEPZ in this 40 decades is that its resilience, its ability to adopt and grow through changing global dynamics. Today, MEPZ SEZ stands as a very strong export hub and a diversified industrial base and improved financial performance, with revenues increasing from 40 crores to 100 crores in the recent years. Looking ahead, our vision is to position MEPZ SEZ as a globally competitive next generation industrial ecosystem. Our focus will be on high value manufacturing, ITITS growth, green energy transition, inclusive workforce development, skill enhancement, and infrastructure upgrades, including a 420 crore revamp of the core infrastructure of the zone and a 78 crore CETP, a common effluent treatment plan with zero liquid discharge. We will also continue to improve the ease of doing business to attract the global and domestic investors. In conclusion, from its very modest beginnings to its present status as a dynamic export hub, MEPZ represents 4 decades of consistent progress. And this constant progress has been made possible because of the sustained contributions of various development commissioners and joint commissioners. And I have the role of the development commissioners and the joint development commissioners. A huge set of illustrious people. I would really want to mention their names and recognize their contribution to what MEPZ has achieved today. Right from the very first development commissioner, Sri T.M. Arumugam IAS from Tamil Nadu cadre, who is no more. Who we requested that his son, who is in the Tamil Nadu cadre, Karthik IAS, to join us. I hope he joins us because he promised to come. And then Srimati Yasmin Ahmed, Sri M.B. Pranesh IAS, Sri V. Venkatachalam IAS, UP cadre, Sri V. Vijayan IAS, Agmut cadre, Sri Ajay Mittal IAS from the UP cadre, Dr. S. Swarna IAS from Tamil Nadu cadre, Sri M. Sai Kumar IAS, the current Chief Secretary of TN, and Sri M.S. Rao IAS, Sri A.K. Bamba ITS, Sri S. Kishore IAS, Sri A.K. Chaudhary ITS, Dr. M.K. Shanmusundaram IAS, my predecessor, the long career of 7 years, and among the JDCs, the illustrious ones are M. Govindan IAS, and M.N. Sivasubramanian IES, K. Suresh IAS, Malidi Shankar IAS. Ma'am, you're present here. Thank you for your presence. We are grateful for your contribution to the organization. And Dr. Jagan Mohan IAS, S. Gopalakrishnan IAS, Dr. S. Swarna IAS again, D. Anantha IAS, and I've also served as JDC for a while, so my name also goes into the role of Joint Development Commissioners. So, I mean, it's a great moment to basically bring you all together, and because this is the first time we decided to celebrate this Foundation Day, because we weren't aware of how to do it. We thought we'll scramble up and put something up, a first show this year, and maybe next year we put up a better show as the 44th Foundation Day and bring all the former DCs and former JDCs together in the MEPZ zone, in MEPZ campus itself, in a better facility. With that small note, I thank everyone for joining us here. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for the warm words of welcome and a reflection of the 43 years that MEPZ has come across and the visionary leaders who have made this possible. I now kindly request the dignitaries on the dais to kindly occupy the front row. I once again request Mr. Alex Paul Menon, Zonal Development Commissioner, MEPZ Special Economic Zone, to lead us into a special segment marking this milestone, an overview of the vision document and the roadmap ahead. I invite you, sir, to address the gathering.
I'll start with an apology because it's going to be a second set of monologue from me. You're going to, forced to listen to me for some more time. Because it's actually good to reminisce the past and cherish the past. It's also important to look into the future. So, we have the presentation loaded? Akshay? So, as we look into the future, when we decided to see what infrastructure transformation should be effected in the SEZ, in MEPZ, we stumbled upon multiple global benchmarks and tried to see where we stand as of today. So what do we try to see for the next 40 years in MEPZ is what we went through. And go to the next slide. So the current investment landscape in India has seen a continuous decline. And in 2024, the global FDI fell by 11%, a continuous second year of decline. And this decline is attributed to the ESG framework. So the FDI inflows are increasingly favoring countries and zones with certified ESG frameworks. Investors, particularly the development finance institutions, are using ESG integration to mitigate non-financial risks. As you can see, the FDI investment in developing Asia is plummeted by -8%. And if you look at Southeast Asia, it's at -37%. But comparatively, Southeast Asia is at +1%. That shows the investment by the development finance institutions and FDIs are particularly moving towards zones where there is increased ESG compliance. Because globally, the DFIs assess the climate risks, for example, flooding or carbon-heavy power dependency, and so they are adjusting this by moving to industrial parks with ZLD, renewable energy, flood protection measures, and these are gaining prominence. When it comes to social risks, strikes, community opposition, they're looking at mitigation efforts by inclusive hiring and social amenities in these industrial parks. So compliance becomes the new incentive. Next slide. So the importance of ESG for FDI flows, if you look at the global industrial park frameworks, I would like to mention two of them here, to highlight two of them here. One is the EIP, the International Eco-Industrial Park as a benchmark, which is working on resource efficiency. with zero liquid discharge and 100% effluent recycling and mandatory waste to resource exchange between units. A key example is the Suzhou Industrial Park, which focuses a lot on circular economy and is attracting a lot of investments. The second industrial park framework is the GASES, which is the Global Alliance of Special Economic Zones, which is mooted by UNCTAD. They have proposed something called as a model SDG zones, and they've been working from 2019. And globally, roughly around 50 SEZs were nominated, out of which 42 were surveyed. From India, we have only one nomination, which is Sri City. Pakistan has 2 nominations. Iran has 1. So it actually appears sad that India could not hit the list with more number of SEZs, where which actually focuses on the SDG 9 goals on infrastructure and the SDG 12 goals on responsible production, targeting transparency and digital single window investability. So what investability is basically defined as attracting investments in the SDG relevant activities and having the highest level of ESG standards and having inclusive growth through linkages and spillovers. If you look at the advantages or the benefits obtained from such kind of a compliance, is that UNCTAD identifies higher tenant retention via the regulatory shields that are available in these industrial parks, for example, carbon accounting, which are essential for EU and US export compliance in the era of CBAMs, the carbon border adjustment mechanism. And there are also further studies which says that wherever we have LEED or well certified assets, they experience 41% shorter vacancy periods when compared to the conventional industrial parks. And there is a JLL research which points out that there is a green premium in rent for these industrial parks which have high level of compliance, which is roughly 7.1% in North America and 9.9% in APAC and 11.6% in London and UK. So if you look at the market impact in India, green certified IT office spaces command 18 to 22% higher rental premiums than the non-certified counterparts. So that shows that compliance is not just for the sake of compliance, it is also profit for the investor. So when we start comparing this, what is the Indian scenario? Next slide. There is a PwC study which was done recently before the IPRS 3.0, which mentions about the quality of infrastructure in Indian SEZs, and these set of pointers are specific to Madras Export Processing Zone as well as the SEZs in Tamil Nadu. Outdated, poorly maintained infrastructure where the existing standard design factories have structural issues, seepage, poor build quality, internal roads are poor, common facilities are absent, and in terms of electricity, non-periodic maintenance, frequent outages to an extent of 1 to 3 hours at times, high cost for the electricity tariffs, poor maintenance, poor water quality. The water quality is at times 1000 to 1500 ppm, which is unsuitable for industrial applications. There is a lack of STPs, combined sewage networks, and then this causes flooding and sewage inflow into the zones, and ad hoc waste collection mechanisms dependent upon municipalities, and lack of fiber optic cables and poor network management. So where does MEPZ stands in this scenario today? So to just next slide, to give a brief overview of how MEPZ looks like, this is the location of MEPZ with an area of 262 acres and a total plot area of 173 acres, a total ground coverage of 68 acres. The total built up area is a meager 1.3 lakh square meters and the total units 119. So this zone has an permissible FSI of 1.5, against which the current usage is 0.7, which is only half of the permitted industrial usage. And the guideline value of this area is roughly 7,700 square feet, translating into a guideline value of 10,000 crores, 9,600 crores. This is guideline value. The market value should be double than what. So we are sitting on an industrial park which is worth 20,000 crores, but catering to only few units in a very horizontal fashion. So we thought we should have an audacious vision for MEPZ, and we sat down with the stakeholders with a lot of consultations happening with all the employees, industries. We did surveys with everybody, and then we decided to clearly form a vision, a document for MEPZ for us to grow further. And we identified missions and projects based upon a homegrown CIPAR, a comprehensive industrial park and assessment and ranking system, which was inspired hugely by all of these international benchmarks called GASES, EIP, etc. And I really want to read the vision of MEPS as to what we want to transform into. We want to transform MEPS into a progressive, planet-friendly, and sustainable business destination with world-class infrastructure, fostering economic growth, technology, and innovation, while championing environmental responsibility and social inclusivity. So we designed 5 missions to do all of this. Mission Clean, where we try to have pollution-free industrial ecosystem, dealing with air quality, waste management, in line with the global standards, and Mission Safe MEPS, where we have a secure industrial hub ensuring public safety, and to integrate real-time emergency services, enhance fire safety and strategic surveillance, to make Mission Green MEPS, to establish MEPS as an oxy-rich, climate-resilient campus with extensive planting of trees and green infrastructure, and Mission Inclusive MEPS to create a socially inclusive and equitable space considering diverse needs of all the stakeholders and common amenities for women, differently abled and underrepresented groups, and also to be growth focused by focusing on infra upgrading, investment promotion and logistics efficiency. I just want to explain each of the mission a little quickly to just see how we had done this work is to basically pick up a global benchmark and to set up our own benchmark and see if, let's say, globally, if there is a WHO air quality standards, what should we fix for ourselves? So we picked up ASHRAE standards, which are actually higher than the WHO standards. So this is a small indicative list. We just put few major projects here to indicate how we are doing it under Mission Clean. As I mentioned, we are in the process of installing indoor AQI monitors in all of our buildings and outdoor monitors also with micro weather stations, SCADA for continuous monitoring, and creation of peripheral sewage conveyance system, installation of CETP and SCTP, and as you see the color coding, the ones in yellow or the ones in green are completed, the ones in yellow are already ongoing projects. This would actually bring in harmonized standards with direct alignment of MEPS with the global benchmarks, or at times even better than the global benchmarks. This will help us to act as a regulatory shield to help in proactive compliance to neutralize the international trade hurdles like CBAM and EUDR. Mission Green, again, new rain gardens, installation of irrigation systems, create renewable energy infrastructure for power generation. We are targeting 24 megawatts of solar energy inside MEPS. DPR is ready for that. To shift to green building ratings for all the old and new buildings, have a big plantation drive. We use something called as a leaf area index to analyze how much trees we should plant in MEPS. It appears MEPS looks like a very green campus, but when we applied LAI, we found that there's a shortage of more than 7,000 trees to cover up. So that's why we decided to put in for more Miyawaki forest yeah. Mission Safe. We wanted to have fire retardants in all the units, lane marking, signals and signages, an electric buggy system with a separate lane for it, a cycling lane, covered and illuminated walkways, and to build an integrated command and control center for 24/7 handling of campus surveillance. And these initiatives actually fulfills the ESG frameworks, helping the tenant units meet international labor and safety standards. And if you look at Mission Inclusive, it speaks about creatures, common toilets, ATM facilities, primary healthcare center inside MEPS, and basically we are having aspirational social standards to see if we can harmonize all the domestic mandates of a Maternity Benefit Act, the RPWD Act, along and taking it to the global benchmarks of UNICEF and WHO standards, ensuring a very dignified workplace for all the 1 lakh employees which we plan to have inside MEPS. And Mission Growth Focused MEPS is where we want to repair and maintain existing SDFs, build new flatted factories, and creation of new plots from unutilized and vacant areas, and creation of a trade facilitation center inside MEPS. And wanted to mention 2 major initiatives because of our efforts. We have tried to include a multimodal transport hub at the MEPS entrance. We have put it in the Kamta regional mobility plan. And we also got, just as I speak, we already got a work order to create an up ramp and down ramp in the bypass road connecting the unit MEPS with the port. So that up ramp and down ramp alone will save roughly 25 kilometers of distance by the container lorries, and that will save a lot of fuel and cost and time overrun for the containers. So we just try to put all of it and put it in a manage the whole thing in a very professional fashion, not just dream, but also execute it. So this is just a Power BI visualization of all of the projects together. There are roughly 162 projects overall planned inside MEPS. under each mission, we have different set of projects. I'll just show you one sample. That's it. Akshay? Yeah, it's taking time to load. What up? Yeah? Maybe it's not possible. Yeah. So it's roughly 162 projects, each of them aligned with the clear missions and project timelines set and officers appointed for each of the tasks. And what we're trying to do is that the next 2 years try and achieve all of the 162 projects so that MEPZ surges ahead in the fashion in which we have dreamt of. And we didn't stop there. We said if MEPZ can act as a trigger, become a model SEZ for the rest of the industrial parks in the region, is it possible? Yeah. This is how it looks like, each of the project, and roughly 1/4 of all of the projects have gone into one single tender, and as we speak, we're already finalizing the tender. We'll be issuing work order after May 4th, and we'll finish 1/4 of the project in the next 18 months. The rest of it will also continue parallelly. So in the span of 2 years, I believe I'll invite ma'am again to MEPZ and see to transform MEPZ in a different way. I have a lot of photographs to show at the end actually. So we didn't stop there. We said, how do we use this trigger and template to influence the other industrial parks around and make them also follow suit? So I'll just finish one more thing about MEPZ. Out of 163 acres of MEPZ, we are targeting to reclaim 77 acres of land, 74 acres of land, which is 44% of the overall saleable area, and redevelop all of them. Out of which around 22 acres have roughly already been aggregated. Another 21 acres has also been 20.7 acres is also planned to be utilized for recreation of new flat-out factories and IT spaces, and the rest of it, around 31.5 acres, to be given to the co-developers who can come in and then claim this space and redevelop this space. Next slide. Yeah. So the dream of MEPZ, we wanted to expand it and extrapolate it across all the SEZs, where we can go as a singular, massive, zonal, compliant network of industrial parks. So it's no longer about managing parks, it's about building a unified regional powerhouse which is completely compliant with the global requirement. So the same missions were expanded to all of the private developers as well as to the state government run SEZs. So we said we cannot do all of it, so we divided it into 3 categories. We will ensure, because it is part of other compliance schemes, and some will enable and some will facilitate, because we don't hold direct authority over the private SEZs, but we can at least influence them using our soft power to move towards such benchmarks. So if you see, I mean, I just quickly run through it because of time. Everything which we dreamt for MEPZ, we're trying to take it to all the industrial parks across this TAP region. So there's a mission clean for all the SEZs, there is a mission green, and there is a mission safe for all the SEZs, and there is also a mission inclusive to get the male-female ratio of the entire TAP region to somehow touch 50-50. We've been pushing our units to adhere to it. We also run a project Pride. We're working on transgender employment in the industrial parks under our jurisdiction. And the expected outcomes of all of it is that we are very sure that there are 2 impacts which we're looking at. One is that MEPZ alone will create another 1 lakh direct new jobs within the zone, because we are planning to increase the existing built-up area by another 1 crore square feet of built-up space inside. And the entire Tamil Nadu impact, if we can go ahead in this fashion, will be creation of another 10 lakh jobs via another 120 scalable industrial parks. Economic activity, we believe that in MEPZ, we'll be able to bring in roughly 3,000 plus crores of investment through land use optimization and SDF redevelopment. And when it comes to the NFE, we see a 2 times projection increase, because we'll be a ESG compliant manufacturing center. And across Tamil Nadu, we want to position ourselves as India's green gateway for high value exports to the European Union and the US markets. In terms of ESG standing, we want to actually achieve a gases model SDG zone status and a LEED Platinum campus rating. And Pan Tamil Nadu, we believe that Tamil Nadu should be established as the global benchmark for the eco-industrial parks itself. And the social impact is that we plan to drive this whole inclusion through on-site creatures, healthcare units, and project initiatives. And we already teamed up with a project called TNV Safe, which is a World Bank project of Tamil Nadu, something called DAIBI, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Belonging, Intersectionality Index, through which we want to rank all the industrial parks and the units and try to push them more towards creating another inclusive workspace. So just some snippets to see, what is all going to come up inside MEPZ. There's a trade facility center, there's a admin building. It's all, as we speak, this is all getting built. Mostly by next year, we'll have them inaugurated. Yeah, and then we're going to revamp the mobility, entire mobility network. There's open air convention center getting built inside. And then further, executive canteen is being built. Next. And this is trying to get in rain gardens and biospheres across the zone. Next. And covered walkways. Next. Open spaces. Next. Keep just rushing. A revamped entrance plaza. Next. Yeah, rear gate. Yeah, go on. This has been built already. Integrated command and control center, where we'll have SCADA and everything monitored in single place. Next. That we presume will be the aerial view of MEPZ in a few years. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for that insightful presentation. It clearly shows that the journey ahead is not incremental, but transformational, driven by clarity of vision, alignment of stakeholders, and a strong focus on execution. We now move to the most anticipated segment of the evening, the Foundation Day Lectures. It is a privilege to have with us two eminent leaders who have played a significant role in shaping India's economic and policy landscape. Our first distinguished speaker is the 18th Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India. He brings with him a rare combination of academic depth, policy insight, and market experience. Prior to assuming office as Chief Economic Advisor, he was a widely respected writer, author, teacher, and consultant. His weekly columns and published work on global finance, derivatives, and the Indian economy have contributed significantly to public discourse on economic policy. He holds a doctoral degree from the University of Massachusetts and is an alumnus of the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. His professional journey spans international financial institutions across Switzerland and Singapore, where he worked extensively in macroeconomic and financial market research. With this deep understanding of global economic trends and India's policy direction, his perspectives are especially relevant as we examine the future of SEZs and India's export growth. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. V. Anantha Nageswaran, Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India. Sir, the stage is yours.
Respected dignitaries, my former colleague in Delhi, Mr. B.V.R. Subramaniam, the current director of the MEPZ, Mr. Alex's presentation did convey something to me, that he's a man in a hurry, he is ambitious, and the energy which he brought to the presentation conveyed all the dynamism that this sector needs, not just here in Chennai, but also elsewhere. And in fact, the manner in which he reached out to me itself was a case of making use of all the available opportunities, which is how he came to know that I was in Chennai, and he decided that, he has to make sure that I somehow rope me into this event. Even though I told him I have a flight to catch, he said, you can catch a flight 2 hours later, and somehow please squeeze in this program as well before you leave Chennai. So, and he managed to make sure that I was able to be present at this event. So I think all these examples convey clearly a man who's on an overdrive. So I think I'm very happy to see that, because that is what we need. So I have a small presentation, which I hope, in a way, if all the stakeholders in the system, whether they are in Delhi or state capitals or elsewhere, display this kind of zeal and dynamism, then I think notwithstanding the global uncertainties, we will definitely have a much surer shot at Viksit Bharat that we are aiming for by 2047. So, where does it go? So tell me where I should point it. Or if you give me the laptop here, I can move it myself. Should I move it here? So I have to point it here, I think. So it's, let me see if it goes back. Okay. Thank you. Oh, first of all, the landed price of crude in India, in general, has been on a declining trend over the last 10 years or so. Barring a small window in 2022 when the Ukraine war started, Indian landed cost of crude shot up, but it came down after that because the government was able to take advantage of the fact that India was asked to purchase crude oil from Russia to stabilize global prices. But the reason I show this chart is we are justifiably proud of the way we have managed the economy post-COVID. 7% plus steady growth rate, declining inflation, fiscal consolidation, and reorienting the government expenditure towards more capital and less revenue expenditure, 3 credit rating upgrades, continued investment in public infrastructure, and a slew of reforms in many areas, including direct tax, indirect tax reforms, and then the Ministry of Environment and Forest removing many of the pollution restrictions, which are making them proportional to pollution intensity, the various free trade agreements. So we have done a lot of things, but underneath all of that is, of course, the energy prices has an important role to play. The energy prices being low also is a subterranean factor which helped in this very good growth performance across the G20 countries. India did stand out, but the fact that this number is now sharply turned upwards naturally brings with it its own risks for growth outlook this year. And this chart shows you, I think, in fact, I should have updated it with the more recent numbers, but the percentages have only gone up even further. This is as of March. I would have loved to show you something as of 27th of April. But the point is the same, that post-conflict, not only crude oil, but fertilizer and many other petrochemicals and cooking gas, many of these things have gone up very sharply in price, both since the conflict started and also in comparison to last year. So this is the second impact of this conflict on us, apart from the oil price and the supply shock. And what you see here is that we have an import dependence in many of these things, whether it is crude oil, LPG, thank you, crude oil, LPG, natural gas, and also many other fertilizer and chemicals which we need for manufacturing. Even many of them are finding out that sulfuric acid is so important for manufacturing memory chips. That is what IT industry, the hardware industry is finding out. So we have an import dependence. We have via Hormuz even stronger dependence. The fact that we are very dependent on energy imports and several other products also points to the post-independence, the difficulties we face in the first 5 to 6 decades in creating a manufacturing ecosystem, and which kind of continues notwithstanding our recent efforts to sort of bring the manufacturing share of GDP higher. But then by now, the window of opportunity has become narrower because China has emerged as a very important competitor. Just to give you a perspective, in 25-26, India had a trade deficit in goods of $333 billion, the year ending March 26, just 1 month ago. And on a GDP of $3.91 trillion, that is 8.5% of GDP, is the merchandise trade deficit. That is, in some sense, shows our vulnerability in terms of external dependence. And that is what we need to be working on. Therefore, and this crisis, therefore, presents an opportunity for us. Because usually, whether it is individuals, institutions, or sovereigns, all of us are able to focus much more clearly on what we need to do when there is a crisis. No matter how much we know enough about physical activity and healthy eating, unless there is a crisis and the doctor reads the right act to us, we don't act. So the same thing applies in the lives of sovereigns and institutions as well. And this is one such opportunity to build buffers, to build a manufacturing ecosystem as on a war footing. Because this crisis is affecting us through 4 channels. One is the energy, oil, gas, and then petrochemicals. The second is overall disruption to global trade, and including to Gulf. So our exports will struggle this year because activity in the world is going to be weaker. And third is the logistics costs. Freight and insurance are going to be higher, and once they go up, they remain sticky there. And the fourth dimension is remittances. India's annual remittance is $120 billion. 80 billion comes from workers, of which 30 to 40 billion comes from the Gulf region. To the extent that Gulf economic activity itself is going to be weaker this year, there will be at least $5 to $10 billion impact on it. So all these 4 things together mean a downside risk to growth, upside risk to inflation, upside risk to current account deficit, and an upside risk to the fiscal deficit. So this is the sort of the broad impact of this crisis on India, which we were not anticipating on the evening of February 27th, when I was standing at the National Media Center in Delhi together with the Secretary Ministry of Statistics, Dr. Saurabh Garg, and very happily saying that I am upgrading my growth forecast for FY27. During the economic survey presentation on Jan 29th, I said India will grow between 6.8 and 7.2% in real terms in FY27. And then on February 27th, I said, look, I'm upgrading this number to 7 to 7.4. Not that it's a big jump, but the important thing was I was taking the 6 out of the equation and saying it will be 7 or better. But then 2 months later now, that feels like ancient history after this conflict started. So this is obviously going to be a question of whether we will, what kind of growth impact will be there. That is not the question, what magnitude will that be? That is the big question now. And the longer this, not only this conflict, even though there could be a ceasefire or a military conflict may be abating, the strategic contest will remain. And that will keep uncertainty levels high. And only now, towards the end of April, many international banks and multilateral bodies are beginning to price in a longer period of higher oil prices. By even until mid-April, there was a certain sense of optimism that somehow come September onwards, oil prices will decline rapidly. But that assumption is giving way to a wave of reality everywhere, which isn't particularly good news for oil importing countries like us and many others in Asia. This is one backdrop to us. The second backdrop is how the geopolitical environment is changing. May 15, there is a slated summit between President Trump and President Xi, but it is quite possible that, given that America intercepted a tanker coming from China, not tanker, a ship coming from China, and he said it was carrying some interesting goods to Iran, etc., but no action was taken, just as no action was taken by the United States for all the oil and gas purchase that China has been doing over the years from Russia, whereas we faced a penal 25% tariff, etc. So the question is whether the United States is looking at some sort of an accommodation with China in a G2 manner. So that we will see in a couple of weeks' time, hopefully, and well, it's not exactly hopefully. If it happens, it obviously will make our strategic window a narrower one again. And the second thing is the G7 as a coherent bloc is for the time being over. And even if this administration gives way to a new one in 2029 in the US, it may not necessarily be put back in the same fashion as it was before 2025 started with President Trump in his second term. Now, these two together, which means the ability to sort of strike a balance between these two hegemons, one aspiring, one status quo, the options become narrower. But India is one country which can actually orchestrate a third way between these two scenarios. Because we have the size, we have the relationship with both developed and developing countries, democratic legitimacy and credibility with the global south to lead a third standard, which is not G7, which is not G2, but we have to act on it, okay? So given that, what are the things that we need to do? So we have a West Asia conflict, we have a huge import dependence, we have a changing geopolitical landscape. And therefore, we have to now get the manufacturing story right, at least now, better late than never. The thing is, in the next 20 years, given this geopolitical situation, making stuff will matter. We have to make stuff. In the last 25 years, I'm not trivializing the major contribution that services made to our exports, to our foreign exchange situation. Without that, imagine, and given our manufacturing drawbacks, we would have been in a far worse position. I don't therefore anyway trivialize the achievements we have done on IT services exports, which bring down our trade deficit significantly. Nonetheless, the world is not going to supply us the goods that we need in the next 2 decades whenever we want them, in whatever quantities we want them. Supply chains will be weaponized. Export controls, export licensing, all these things are going to be more the norm than the exception. And therefore, being able to make the stuff that we need is going to be important. That is why manufacturing matters more than ever. In a globalized world, probably we could offset our manufacturing drawback with services strength, and it didn't really matter. But now countries are going to be extremely uninhibited in making it more difficult for us to import the stuff we need. And that is something we need to be prepared for. And if you see the way our manufacturing, we haven't done so badly, because if you look at the merchandise exports of India as a share of world goods exports, we were very low levels, 0.6%. We are now at 1.8%, even higher than Vietnam, which has a share of 1.6% in world goods exports. But while this is half the story, the other half tells you the real picture. The share of high-tech in Vietnam's exports is 44.2, India's is only 18.6%. It has doubled, but somebody else who started at the same level has gone up by almost 4x in that period. Partly, they are considered an easier, logical alternative to China by many people, but nonetheless, given our market size and given our demographic advantage, we should have done better on this side. And then if you look at the FDI, this is a 2015 to 2023 average, we have improved. Then the net FDI numbers, we are at 1.7% of GDP compared to 0.8% before. And but looking at other countries like Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam, the percentage share of GDP is higher there, even though they may have come down from their own peak in the case of Philippines and Thailand. So we are not exactly kind of receiving the kind of FDI as a percentage of GDP that we need to. And some of the issues that Alex presented in this presentation are some of the inhibiting factors. We need to work on them. And then this slide, this chart shows you foreign value added as a percentage of gross exports, shows how much we are integrated in the global value chain. But the answer is not much compared to Vietnam, which is again 48%. So the point is, if we were the China plus one alternative, we should be doing a lot better. Vietnam has been the China plus one alternative, but the sobering news is that a week ago, China came out with new rules, 834, 835 they call it, and they notified it. They are making it more and more difficult for foreign supply chains to leave China. They have actually made it almost a punishable offense. And the wording is so vague that anything and everything can be interpreted as injuring China's supply chain if you choose to relocate out of China. So they are making it almost impossible for any country to have aspirations about being the plus one in China plus one, and they have now made it almost official policy. So in this context, we therefore somehow have to try to make active industrial policy. So much so that even World Bank, after 30 years of being a globalizing champion, came out with a 200-page report on industrial policy that countries have to onshore a lot of production. And a clear example comes in this case of the company called BAE Holston, which during World War II was making 1 million per day of output of the explosives, RDX and HMX. Then, after that, in 70 years, the output of 400 million came down to barely 8 million. And then more recently, please don't wonder why number 8 is much taller than number 15. It can't be. There is a type mistake there. But the point is, this 8 million pounds of output increased to 15 million output. It should have been the other way around after some specific investments made. Now, can you imagine fighting a war with your enemy without explosives? So that is the kind of manufacturing hollowing out that happened in the West, and we can't allow that to happen to ourselves. Okay, so this is just an example of how basically the Western nations decided to outsource everything in terms of manufacturing and only concentrate on financialization, which is not going to be particularly helpful for a developing country like India. And then, so this is one challenge. The second challenge we face is the energy transition, where again we are import dependent. Solar energy, the materials you require, I don't know how many of you can see this here. We require so much of silver, polysilicon and aluminium to generate 1 gigawatt of solar, 18.5 tons of silver, 2,000 to 3,000 tons of polysilicon and 10,252 tons of aluminium just to make 1 gigawatt of solar. And all these things are energy intensive in and of themselves. And then if you talk about the wind energy, you require 2,866 tons of copper. Now, I'm not presenting these arguments to say we shouldn't be therefore diversifying into renewable energy. We should, given what you saw in the previous slide about energy import dependence. The point is, the world will be running short of copper, and the world will be running short of aluminium. Therefore, we have to build buffers of these commodities. We don't look at Japan and Canada on kerosene and diesel. Together, these countries, each one of them have 2 years of storage, 2 years of inventory. So in other words, when we talk of manufacturing, we have to talk of energy security. And for energy security, we need to have resource security as well. And for many of these items, the rare earths and the magnets that go into this, we depend on China. So we can't shift our import dependence on crude oil from West Asia to dependence on China for renewable energy supply. So if we want to do renewable energy, we got to make the entire backward and forward integration much faster for India. So that is the message here. And the energy storage required will be close to 411 gigawatt hours by 2132 to support the renewables build out. And in most of these things, cells, cathodes, anodes and electrolytes, every layer is a manufacturing decision that we need to make for ourselves. And therefore, also, if we get manufacturing right, we will also get our exchange rate right. If you look at worldwide, if you look at the countries that have strong and stable currency, what names will come to your mind? Pre-Euro, you will think of Germany, Switzerland, Japan in Asia, Korea, Taiwan, Singapore. All these countries would come to your head as countries which are boasting of a strong and stable currency. And what is common between them? They had manufacturing excellence, at least in a few areas. I missed out the Netherlands as well. So in other words, services unfortunately doesn't give you currency strength. You look at any global example, it doesn't give you. Basically, manufacturing gives you strategic leverage, and that is what foreign exchange leads to eventually foreign exchange strength, currency strength as well. So in other words, getting manufacturing right is very important, and that is where export processing zones have to play a very big role, because that is what you need to be able to export to become globally competitive and achieve strategic leverage. So the EPZ story and manufacturing story are both interlinked. That is important to keep in mind. And therefore, if India has to move from pure import substitution to a position of strategic resilience and then to achieve strategic indispensability. In other words, Import substitution should be the first stage of reducing global dependence. That is, reducing external dependence. The second stage is how do you withstand external shocks? And the third stage is world depends on you. So some of the issues that Alex identified in his presentation will be important to, and if you remove them, it will be important to attract global value chains into the country, to develop export capability and global standards leadership. So for us, if we have to move from import dependence to import substitution to strategic indispensability, we have to leverage our special economic zones and export processing zones far better than we have done so far. And that is where I think SEZs will play a big role, from being export enclaves to strategic engines. So we stand only 15.7% of our exports come from SEZ, 50.3% of them are mainly IT and IT enabled services, and 79% are concentrated in just 6 states of SEZs. And the square kilometers, the average size in India is 1 square kilometer, whereas in Shenzhen began with 327 square kilometers in 1980. And the 30,000 crores or 10,000 crores square feet of SEZ space is lying vacant, as he also pointed out that the FSR ratio is 0.7, half of what was permitted, which he pointed out. Therefore, the SEZ premise must evolve. In 2005, it was meant to be a cost-driven export arbitrage, mainly service-led growth, and the target markets were US and EU, and tax incentives was the main magnet. But going forward, in the next 20 years, it has to be a manufacturing-led industrial substance, strategically positioned in the categories where the world has become contested. Globally diversified demand and indispensability as the headline draw or the motivating factor. That is how we need to reimagine SEZ, and my last 20 minutes of my presentation was to set the context as to why SEZ have to be a strategic policy choice in the next 20 years. And what firms that the what should the firms in the SEC should do? What should they do? They should choose strategic depth over services convenience. Move away from IT and IT-enabled services dominance into the categories that the world is going to be fighting for. Fine chemicals, electronic components, energy transition material, precision engineering. Shallow experts will not get us strategic weight. And anchor domestic value chains in SEZ, source from Indian suppliers, build clusters of MSMEs around the zone, treat net foreign exchange as a floor and not a ceiling. Cluster, scale and integrate in the 1 square kilometer island model, co-locate adjacent firms, share logistics and utilities, and pursue plug and play industrial parks. Scale is what turned Shenzhen from an SEZ into an ecosystem. So we have to pursue an ecosystem approach. Diversify our export geographies, that is self-explanatory. We should lead on global standards, not just meet them. Because the space is going to be open, there is going to be a contestation between US and China, and we can create a third standard or a third group. Build technology and IP and not cost arbitrage. Cost advantages will eventually erode. Just for example, IT-enabled services was built on India's labor cost arbitrage. Now AI is removing that labor cost arbitrage. So cost arbitrage is never an enduring solution for industrial competitiveness. Defensible technology is what will compound over time. Investing in R&D, design, patents, and skills inside the zone. The exit from a tax holiday must be an entry into an innovation mode. Tax exemption brought firms into SEZ. Strategic indispensability is what must keep them, and that is what will make India indispensable to others. If you look at the Asia Power Index of India ranks among the most underperforming country in terms of how we utilize our power, strategic power. A minus score means you are punching below your weight. And we are only better than 2 other countries which are obviously not in global favorites list of many of the developed countries. So even other countries, this only looks at countries which have a negative number. But a power gap of -4 means we absorb shocks very well, but we do not convert our resources into global influence. When will this number become positive is global influence means when the world moves from thinking about buying Indian goods to buying Indian goods without thinking. And that is why I think that is where the role of SEZs play a big role. But at the end of the day, the purpose of my presentation over the last 25 minutes has been to show you how the context is changing very rapidly. It is becoming harder. At the same time, it is also leaving us with no choice but to pursue manufacturing. And given that special economic zones or export processing zones have been set up with the purpose of achieving competitiveness, the more we do to achieve their true objectives and not just be a cost arbitrage for IT-enabled services, then by 2047, not only will we be a Viksit Bharat, but will also be strategically indispensable. And therefore, the role of export processing zones is very, very critical in this manufacturing drive that this country has no choice but to pursue as if there is no tomorrow. But as Mark Tully said, the late BBC correspondent, he said in a speech, I'm an optimist because I have seen the Indian people do the impossible every single day. So we have to basically fulfill Mark Tully's optimism about India, and it is up to us to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for taking the time off your busy schedule and gracing this event, and for the insightful address, particularly your perspective on the changing global landscape and the central role of manufacturing in shaping India's economic future. Your emphasis on reimagining SEZs as strategic engines provides a clear and compelling direction for the road ahead. It is now my honor to introduce our next distinguished speaker of the evening. He is one of India's most respected administrators and economic strategists. He is a 1987 batch IAS officer of the Chhattisgarh cadre, and he most recently served as the CEO of Niti Aayog, where he played a key role in driving India's development agenda with a strong focus on manufacturing growth, service expansion, and digital transformation. Over the course of his distinguished career, he has held several critical positions, including that of the Commerce Secretary of India, Chief Secretary of Jammu and Kashmir, and key roles in the Prime Minister's office across multiple administrations. In addition, he has had extensive engagement with global and national institutions, having worked on the board of the World Bank and played a pivotal role in advancing India's trade agenda, including accelerating free trade negotiations and contributing to reforms in the SEZ framework. He has also contributed to public policy through his writings and as well as research papers, and he also holds a master's degree in international law and economics with distinction from the World Trade Institute. His forward-looking approach, including his emphasis on structured, phased economic strategy, offers valuable insight into how India can sustain long-term growth. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Shri B.V.R. Subramaniam, IAS retired, former CEO Niti Aayog and former Commerce Secretary of India.
My friend and colleague Alex, thank you for giving me an opportunity to come here and speak to the audience. My former colleague and friend Anantha Nageswaran, other colleagues in the room, Mr. Skandan, Mr. Shankar, others in the room. I mean, it's a pleasure and an honor to be with all of you here today. It's wonderful because I've been to MEPZ once before when I was Commerce Secretary, and it's nice to see all these ambitious plans being laid down in front of you. And I think you got the right man at the top, a person with vision, drive, as Anantha Nageswaran has spotted rightly, and the man to actually get these things going. I don't know how much you know about the history of Alex Paul Menon. He has a unique distinction which probably no other civil. There are a couple of civil servants in Andhra who share that. He was an IAS officer who was a collector in Sukma district, a place which has now been rid of Naxalism. Just the Home Minister announced it on 31st of March. He was kidnapped by Naxalites as the district collector for 13 days and was released with a great deal of effort. So that is a man you have in front of us actually leading the drive to make MEPZ as the hallmark of the future. I'm not going to have a presentation, but it's going to be a free-flowing talk. My job has been made easier because the CA has actually given the larger world view on where the world is as far as economics is concerned. And therefore, I'm not going to spend much time on it. I'm going to lay the larger groundwork on why exports are actually very important. He gave the tilt towards manufacturing. I'm going to give it an additional tilt. It's going to be manufacturing for exports. So, it's an additional layer which I will add to what he has actually said. As far as world trade is concerned, when you go into geology and history, you have, the age of dinosaurs or age of reptiles and age of mammals. We are currently living through the age of tariffs, right? So, these things come, these things go. There's always a flavor of the day, like you go to Nirula's in Delhi. So this is there. And you're hearing a lot of new jargon which was not there even 5 years ago, friend shoring, near shoring, realigning GV, global value chains, supply chains, etc. So that's reality, and you have to live with it. And I think, let us be very clear, economics theory is all on one side, but this is the reality the world is facing, and we have to live with that, because end of the day, decisions are taken by political leaders, by bureaucrats, etc. And that is reality which we have to live with. The second reality in the world today as far as trade is concerned, and I'm mentioning this because particularly for an export promotion zone, it becomes very, very relevant. The WTO is not delivering what it was intended to deliver. World trade is getting fragmented. We all thought from 1947, 45 when GATT came into existence till 94 when the WTO was formed, until about 5 years ago, Trump won. We thought the world is moving in one direction, that you have a rule-based world trading system where things will be all happening as per rules. The big and the strong and the weak and the small will all be treated equally. Unfortunately, that has been broken very, very rapidly, more rapid than people actually thought. I mean, rich countries are striking deals out of fear of each other. And what happens to smaller countries? What happens to poorer countries? So you are heading into a world trading system which is very, very fragmented. The third thing is, which is something which was happening even before the WTO was fragmented, which is that because the WTO was not trading, what was the WTO all about? It was actually about making trade freer, easier, with lower and lower tariffs. And let's not deny the fact that the world has seen sustained growth from 1945 globally till about 2000, 2005 through a sustained growth of global trade from almost a very, very small fraction of global GDP to a very high fraction. And the largest movement of people out of poverty has been attributed to trade. And the biggest country which has actually benefited from this movement of freer trade is China and nobody else. We have created China. The United States and Europe created China. And you saw the figures. The decline in production in the US was actually mirrored by the increase in production in China, funded by the Americans and the Europeans. But that was the way it was. But in the last 20, 25 years, particularly since the Doha round began, somewhere in the 90s of negotiation, the WTO stopped delivering anymore, either in tariffs or in services or in agriculture. So what happens is, because WTO was not delivering, you saw a mushrooming of free trade agreements, regional trading agreement, countries were entering into bilateral deals. For a long time, India resisted all that. But I think we have had to have a policy reset, because we can't stand in splendid isolation. We started signing our own trade agreement. Small steps first, some mistakes, some errors here and there. But you've seen the flurry of free trade agreements, particularly signed in the last 5 years. We have done with UAE, Australia, now with Europe, UK, now just I think 2 days ago with New Zealand. There's so many more in the pipeline, GCC under negotiation, Israel, South Africa, and a whole host of it, and obviously possibly something with the United States as well. So this is a change that has happened. This is where the world, so India is continuously expanding its trade grid also. It's important again in an SEZ context. And what are these new FTAs all about? And that's something to clearly line. The old FTAs were all about tariffs and market access. The new FTAs, which I call FTA 2.0, are actually about a lot of things which are behind the borders. When I say behind the borders, it's not only about tariffs and what are your customs duties, etc. It's about your standards, your regulations, your quality standards, your sanitary and phytosanitary standards. In the latest agreements which I have signed with UK, Europe, etc., there are chapters on labor, on environment, on gender, on transparency, on anti-corruption. They're huge. It's 26 chapters. Old FTAs used to be about 4-5 chapters. You will have goods, you will have services, you will have something on rules of origin, something on dispute settlement, and one more chapter here and there, maybe some investment thrown in. This has now gone into 25, 26 chapters. They are larger than the WTO's own agreements. So these are a new body of data which actually people have not even understood. As these agreements start kicking in, all those features will start kicking in, and I think that's the future where we are. And the other thing we are seeing is there are global value chains, and the global value chains are getting rapidly realigned. It's not that global value chains are vanishing, but now global value chains are being realigned to friends. Are you my friend? So you are part of the global value chain. If you're not a part of my friendly group, you're cut out of a global value chain. So this is where it is. And in the middle of all this, you have this great nation, India, Bharat, trying to reach out and go for its aspiration of becoming a Vikasit Bharat by 2047 with a per capita income of a high income country, which is about $17,000-18,000, which will translate into a GDP of about $30 trillion, of which trade is expected to be a significant portion, anywhere between $9 to $10 trillion, total trade, but exports as well as imports. And if you have to have and reach that Vikasit Bharat level, you need to grow somewhere between 6 to 7% over the next 20-25 years. There are going to be multiple engines of growth. There's going to be domestic demand, there'll be government demand, there'll be investment demand, but one leg of that is going to be export demand. No country has become prosperous without selling to the rest of the world. I mean, that's something we have to realize. The Industrial Revolution in England was actually made possible because they could sell their products elsewhere. They could sell it to colonies, they had captive markets around the world, but trade requires exports to drive growth, because that is an important thing. If you don't have exports, I mean, even if you take Indian figures, about $400 billion of merchandise and about $350 billion of services, about $750 billion of export. That's 20-25% of our GDP is actually exported. That's a substantial chunk of jobs, employment, growth. So you need to have that export focus for Vikasit Bharat. So this is the this thing. And there are certain things which are playing out to India's advantage in all this, muddle which we are going through. Demography is not only in our favor, it's against the rest of the world. Europe is facing declining population. United States is going to be largely stable. Large parts of the world are going to get actually into a situation where there will be a labor shortage. If you see the projections of China, I'm actually not terrified of China in the very, very long run. Maybe I'm terrified in the shorter run. The projections for Chinese population end of this century is about 6 to 700 million, 60-70 crores. They will be half our size, half. Now you realize their worries and their tensions. If you are actually running China, you'll be staring at this problem. My country is going to shrink. It's happening all over Europe. It's happening in East Asia. It's happening in China, Japan. It's happening even faster in Korea. India is going to be one of those rare countries, apart from Africa, which will have a growing population. Demography is going to be your advantage. So if you want to be in manufacturing or you want to be in services, where is the labor going to come from? It's going to come either from India or from Africa. The second big advantage to us is actually this realignment of GVCs. Friend-shoring, near-shoring. The good thing is India is a friend of most nations. Are we doing the right things to get this opportunity to India? Are people shifting their supply chain so that instead of buying from country A, they shift to India? I think that's something we need to look at. It's a huge opportunity. The third thing is, we are seeing this huge discussion. You saw the presentation by Alex, which is about, ESG goals, making the MEPZ as a place where you get, green certificates, etc. You've got climate change on one side and AI, which is actually disrupting a whole host of stuff. AI is not about IT. AI is a fundamental technological intervention, as important as the invention of the steam engine or invention of the motor car, that it is now called a foundational technology. It will disrupt every part of the economy. It is going to be so fundamental that for us, disruptions are good. Disruptions are bad for incumbents who are big. But for somebody who wants to break through, a disruption opens doors. At that time, you can slice yourselves through. As the world moves from IC engines to EVs, we have an opportunity. As the world moves from old ways of production to new ways of production, we get an opportunity. Because everybody is equal when there is a disruption. The Chinese have done that in cars. So we see all these things. So what does it mean we need to do? We need to focus on exports massively and move ahead. And I'm trying to build up my story of what you need to do in an export processing zone. And you saw the last slide of Dr. Nageswaran, where he actually showed all the 6 large areas one should focus on. So if you want to exploit the opportunities that are arising out of this turbulence, turbulence is not good for an individual, but if for a national level, somebody like India, turbulence is good because you actually can exploit the gaps and get in. That's the way to look at this turbulence that is there globally. Because are you friends with the US? Yes. Are you friends with Europe? Yes. Are you friends with Africa? Yes. So you have a lot of things in your favor. Geopolitics is in your favor. I think we need to be aggressive and move fast and do the right things. And I think that's very, very important. We should have very clear goals. Some of the goals you saw here, Atmanirbharta, having self-sufficiency, making others dependent on you. These are very clear goals. You should have many such goals and go for them fast. We need much more ease of doing business. We need to deregulate, make life simpler for industry, for business, etc. to operate. And the other thing is, our industry should be globally minded. I keep worrying about one thing. And that's where I'm worried, where the security argument will be a new argument for protectionism. We need to be very careful. We may get intoxicated by the size of our domestic market. That for me is a route to failure. Use your domestic market, but keep the domestic market competitive. Don't leave your domestic market for a few players to become thick and fat, because these people are the ones who are going to sink you finally. They are not going to. You go to the Chinese market, they've got more than 50 EV companies killing each other. The Chinese have a word for this. And the government is trying to reduce the number of EV companies. Competition within Japan and within China is killing. That's the kind of situation we need to have. My concern is, are we going to raise walls of tariffs, etc., to protect a few incumbents who are not going to be competitive then? And that's the key worry which we have. So we need to have a global mindset. People in other countries, and that includes China, it has happened in Japan in the 60s, protect them but give them export targets. Your protections are going to be valid only if you meet those targets, otherwise the protections vanish. Because otherwise they have a home market and they can live on it perpetually. 100 billion, 100 crore people is a good number. Push companies to be competitive, cost effective, high quality, and globally relevant as far as standards are concerned. This is very, very, and be very, very customer focused. It's a very interesting one figure which I saw as Commerce Secretary. 40-50% of India's exports come from MSMEs. I mean, what are our big companies doing? Take your top 5 companies in India, ask them how much of your products are exported. It's a revelation how little they export. And if they're exporting commodities. It's not great manufacturing. These are not going to be world-beating companies. They're not going to be great creators of technology. I mean, if MSMEs are going to be half your exports, what are the big companies doing? I think these are fundamental questions we need to ask, because competitiveness will have to come from the top, from the big companies. If you go to Japan and ask them who are your biggest exporters, you will have Mitsubishi, Matsushita, Sumitomo, all the car companies, Honda, Toyota. Where are they? I mean, where are the Indians in these fields? We export oil, we export aluminium, we export steel. These are not the technologically very, very advanced kind of products we should be exporting. We have a problem on the MSME sector. The problem with the MSME sector is 99% of, MSME stands for micro, small and medium enterprises. 99% are micro, 0.7% are small, 0.3% are medium. What is a micro? Micro means mom and pop shop, father and son running some, lathe machine or a thela on the road, a trolley on the road and, selling idli vada in the morning. That's also MSME. But the second medium are the companies which are 1,000 crore turnover. And they're the ones who will become your big companies. And India doesn't have enough of medium companies. This is a sector which needs to be addressed very, very strongly. And there are a lot of other issues which we need to be doing. But before we going there, if exports are so important, what is the role of SEZs in this, in making India a big, exporting nation? Let's go into the history. Why we have SEZs at all? Why did they come? Look at the situation post 1947 when we got independence. We were a poor country. People were worried whether we would continue as a single nation. We had high tariffs for a very long time, protecting us. And we had very complex procedures, everything. You want to get a dollar or you want to exchange a dollar for a rupee, procedures were very complex. And we were largely an agricultural exporting country and some basic manufacture, some textile, some little. That's what India was in 1947. Our systems were designed for that. And what came along? We had a dollar shortage. So what? And it was not India's problem. It is a problem for a large number of developing countries. So everybody felt, seeing the success particularly in East Asia, that we create an enclave where we allow much more freer movement of people, goods, etc. with minimal procedures so that they can actually start manufacturing up to global needs and standards. So SEZ is nothing but creating an enclave in a normal area which is quite backward, I'm saying that very emphatically, in procedures, processes and rules. But create an enclave which is very advanced. Because why? You needed production, you needed output, you needed exports, you needed foreign exchange. And largely, the whole thing imitated one industrial estate which came up in Taiwan, which came up next to an airport. The first SEZ in the world was next to an airport. And that was how the Taiwanese industrialization happened. It was huge. Logistics is simple. You just get it out of an aircraft and out of the country. That was how SEZ did. So we set up these special, so SEZs were nothing but special manufacturing zones with ease of doing business. And the goal is very simple. Have manufacturing, have output. It gives us two things. It gives us jobs. And two, it gives us exports, which means we get foreign currency. This was the simple logic. So your MEPs and SEZs in Mumbai and, the one in Cochin and the one in Noida and the one in Falta in Calcutta, all preceded SEZs. They came as export promotion zones. And why? Because you needed the foreign exchange and you needed jobs. And that was the logic. And the enclaves were about an enclave which has a very easy way of doing business. So what we call EODB at the national level today was supposed to be happening within the MEPS or SEZs kind of a environment. But there became a problem. When the SEZ Act came, it was actually very damaging in one way. It was damaging because the original MEPS, SEZs, etc. became, in a SEZ framework, nothing but a tax play. It became an income tax, corporate tax play. And so you had a huge boom, but the boom was driven not for the right reasons, but for the wrong reasons, and let us be honest. And we are suffering the consequences of that till today. I mean, you have single buildings which have been declared as an SEZ. Show me any other part of the world where, a plot of land which is, say, about 1,000 square yards is also declared as an SEZ, because you build a 10-storied building out of it and you declare it as an SEZ. That was not the concept of an SEZ, and I think that's the first thing. The second thing with an SEZ, which became a huge problem later on, is we distinguished an SEZ, because it was created originally as an enclave, as something which is cut off from the domestic market. So the country today has one production system for international, which is SEZ, and one production system for domestic, which is outside the SEZ. So while we want a lot of things to happen in the SEZ, create an ecosystem, all the things which Dr. Nageswaran has said, we created a wall around the SEZ, making it impossible for an SEZ to do any of those. Because SEZ can't look at India, it has to look at only rest of the world. And rest of India doesn't look at the SEZ. So it's a very strange, so you have created this island, you inherited it from when you created an export processing zone, which means you wanted EODB here. At that time we were a poor country, we were not a big market. So you isolated the SEZ now from the domestic market, which over years has become large and is growing and growing rapidly. So every fellow in an SEZ says, okay, is it easier for me to sell in United States or can I sell it in Chennai? It's actually easier to sell in Chennai, more profitable, everything, all the headaches are out. Let me jump out of the SEZ into the domestic market, because we have put a wall around the SEZ. So we distinguish the domestic and international, and I think that's the crux of the problem. So, and there is an additional two other problems. When you created an SEZ, and what is the vision of an SEZ? To have a single one-stop shop. where everything happens at the desk of the development commissioner or somebody under that person. Unfortunately, while some powers got delegated to the development commissioner, some powers are not delegated to the development commissioner. Under some laws, some powers have been delegated. Many other laws, the development commissioner, you go to Jebel Ali in Dubai, you meet whoever is the head of the Jebel Ali Free Trade Zone. All approvals and permissions are given there. Whereas if you come to MEPZ, there are many activities of MEPZ, which factories in MEPZ have to do, for which you have to go outside, either the state government or somebody else for permission. Then what is the purpose? So this one-stop shop never got fructified fully. And last but not the least, if SEZs are successful or were to be successful, what you learned in the SEZ was to be translated in the rest of the Indian manufacturing ecosystem. There is no conversation there. So you have SEZs Mumbai, which is world class, say in jewelry. People come to SEZs and ask for manufacturing. I'm talking of Mumbai. That has not penetrated the gold jewelry ecosystem outside SEZs. It can be repeated multiple times. The whole idea is what you learn in an SEZ then is copied outside. So when we do an EODB nationally, which we are doing, we don't try to learn what have we done in the SEZ and succeeded or failed. Because that cross-learning. So the purpose of an SEZ was getting lost. So the conclusion is, have SEZ served a purpose? They have served a purpose. You've seen the figures of Dr. Anantha Nageswaran. 15% of our manufactured exports come from SEZ. Impressive number. Impressive numbers of jobs. Not just Chennai, but the whole country. There are about 250, 300 SEZs. Impressive amount of jobs. And they have served that purpose of both output as well as employment. The second is, unfortunately, they have not helped ease of doing business in the rest of India. And lastly, they have not created an ecosystem, because we have created an artificial wall between the SEZ and the rest of the country. So I think this is it. So in this context, what do we do? Do SEZs have a relevance? As Commerce Secretary, the first thing I heard was SEZs are outdated. Band karo. Simple. One-liner. 2 words. Band karo. I said, fine. Maybe there's somebody knows more than me. I didn't know the subject. You went around going, every month in the board of approvals, I would get 2 SEZs for approval. Every month. Why? There's no tax anymore. Nobody's asking, nobody gets any more corporate tax concession. Why are you opening it? I was just asking Mr. Ralan next door. He's promoting a SEZ. Why are you opening new SEZs if there is no benefit? There is a benefit. You have to go down and ask people. And then they'll tell you. There is no paperwork if we are in an SEZ. So if you're an export-oriented unit or industry, an SEZ gives you 100% EODB. I asked a guy in Chennai, not Chennai, beyond in your Chennai region. I went to a footwear manufacturing chap near Tiruvannamalai, and he said very clearly, it's a Taiwanese company, I think Lotus Footwear or whatever it's called. They make Nike shoes, 33,000 people at one location. I said, well, and 95% of what goes into the shoe is imported. We only give the packaging and whatnot. That also shows no ecosystem. I mean, even the shoelace comes from outside India. They make the shoe exported. But anyway, 33,000 people have got jobs, of which 30,000 are women. Good. I said, then why? And he was opening a new SEZ somewhere south of Chennai. This is near Tiruvannamalai. I said, why are you opening a third? This is third SEZ. And the entire SEZ is only his factory. He gave a simple reason. My container lands in Chennai, it comes straight to the factory, I open it in the factory, I do my production, put it here, seal it here, customs guy stamps it at site, it goes out of India. I don't have to handle Chennai port. It tells you tellingly how bad our ease of doing business is, that the reason for SEZ is there is no EODB in the rest of the country. The people are coming. And then you talk to somebody in MEPZ, and I think Alex would know that there is a guy here who manufactures small micro motors. It's a Japanese company, opened here in the 70s, one of the earliest chaps. And he told me a sob story, the Japanese guy, that he makes motors which go to all OEM guys in India, Myco, Bosch, everybody, all the things which put your windows up and down in your cars, etc. He said, if I'm supplying around the world, I can work out of the MEPZ. If I have to sub to Mahindra in Pune or Tata's in Jamshedpur, I can't supply from here because of the duty structure. I am being forced to open another factory outside MEPZ, outside the SEZ ecosystem to supply. It's a waste of my capital. I am duplicating my manufacturing line. That tells you the sad story. So I think these are the things. So in this context, what's the point in having SEZs? Number one, I think GVCs are very important. And the thing about GVCs, and you saw the graph of India and Vietnam there, 70% of world trade happens within GVCs. Less than 10% of India's exports are part of GVCs. We are still not a part of the world GVC ecosystem. And the reason is like that. Our thinking, when I say thinking, our procedural thinking is the old production model. Raw material goes into a factory, finished product comes out. That's not the way production happens. Comes in, goes out, somebody makes, comes back, goes here, it moves. I am not carrying a presentation. If you see a Dell computer and how it is manufactured, it looks like a jumble of lines. 30 locations, 400 products moving in and out. Our procedures, particularly customs and shipping procedures, are not designed for new manufacturing systems. So is the fault with our production or with our procedures? So if you want to be part of these production systems, you want to be part of GVC, you need SEZs. Otherwise, you're cut out of long. I mean, there's another telling story. Who is the second largest importer of manufactured goods in the world? It's China. US is the largest importer, slightly more than 3 trillion. China imports 2.5 trillion worth of goods. We sell almost nothing to China. That tells us how bad our integration into GVCs is. China is a net deficit trader with Japan, with Korea. They actually sell more to China. So you can actually sell into China. So our manufacturing strength is reflected in your trade dispersion, and that's very, very important. And therefore, we need SEZs because our procedures are not designed for GVCs. And SEZs are perfectly designed for global value chains because your procedures are easy. The third is the global model for large industrial parks today is a one-stop shop, even in the United States, which is far more liberal. You go to one place and everything is done, end-to-end processing. Okay, that's what every state government tries to advertise, right? Every UP, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, everybody says single window, single window. SEZs by very definition are supposed to be single window. We need to only expand them and make them single window. And the other is services, because they're growing fast, is also a huge growth area for services, for SEZs to do. So what do we need to do to make EPZs or SEZs the drivers of export growth, which was the topic which Alex actually indicated? Firstly, I think we need to break this distinction between foreign and domestic. There is no real distinction. It's a mindset distinction. We have created multiple walls where there need be none. If you want to make export manufacturing in India, we have 3 parallel systems. So I can actually pick and choose. I have SEZ, I have EOU, it still exists, and I have mover. All 3 have different features, different benefits. It makes no logic to have 3 different systems. You should have 1. And 2, you should not distinguish between manufacturing for domestic. If procedures can be so easy for export manufacture, why can't they be so easy for domestic manufacture? I think that's very, very important. I mean, this is there. Otherwise, what happens is you create friction. The moment you create this distinction, foreign manufacture, domestic manufacture, I'm putting a wall here. The moment I put a wall, you're already disincentivizing. And a lot of people don't come to India because of this distinction. People come to India to set up factories only if they have to sell in India or only if they have to sell abroad. Somebody who wants to do both is stuck mentally. Which do I choose? Because if you go to domestic and export, then you pay duties and then you apply for refunds. And SEZ doesn't require all that. You pay the duties only if you sell domestic. So I think this is required policy clarity. The second is, and this is an important thing for SEZ, and those 6 points which Dr. Anantha Nageswaran mentioned, SEZ should be the laboratories for industrial ecosystem. You can experiment with new rules and procedures in SEZ first. Try something. Suppose I say rules of origin. This is one of the big things in free trade agreement. In SEZ, I'd say rules of origin will be self-certification or by industry associations. We think normally industry associations are thugs, cheats. So we don't trust them. Okay, most other parts of the world, by the way, I've negotiated the Australia FTA. The rules of origin certificate is given by the industry association, not by government. Trust the SEZ at least to experiment with it. If it works for 5 years, do it for the rest of the country. Why do I need a customs officer or a trade service officer to give a rule of origin? Why can't you trust the industry? I'm not saying. Try in an SEZ. So SEZs can be your laboratories for experimenting newer and simpler procedures with a very clear idea. It's not exclusively for SEZ. If it succeeds, we'll take it to the rest of the country. That's the second one. It can be not only for customs. It can be for banking. It can be for finance. A whole host of things. Take, for example, Gift City. I don't know how many of you in this room realize Gift City is an SEZ. It was registered as an SEZ. It's now after Modi ji became the Prime Minister that we created a separate act for Gift City. But Gift City grew as an SEZ. It's a financial SEZ. So we can have different financial procedures for an SEZ. Different way of looking and assessing things, and it works. Then you can do it and copy it in the rest of the country without putting the whole country at risk in an experiment. The third is, as I said, make it a full, genuine one-stop shop. And the fourth thing is that area thing which came up. 1 square kilometer SEZ average doesn't make sense. I mean, 100 square kilometers starts making sense. I mean, MEPZ, the problem with the development commissioner is they wear 2 hats. One is as the development commissioner for entire Tamil Nadu, Pondicherry, Andaman, whatever is there. And the other is he also is the developer of his own SEZ. So, the dual hats. I would give more importance to the first hat. His biggest SEZ is actually Sri City, which is bigger than his own MEPZ. And Sri City is what, 18,000 acres, with another 13,000 acres being added. That's the size where a SEZ starts working. So I think go for mega SEZs. And mega SEZs are the way for the future. And it's not just way of the future with flatted factories, worker housing. That's the way it should be. And I think that's the direction in which one should be moving. And I would urge MEPZ to talk to Tamil Nadu government, whoever is there, for mega SEZs to be promoted. Just one other thing. The other is, what is the mechanism that is needed for incentivizing all state industrial estates or central industrial parks to become SEZs? It should become so attractive that every industrial park should say, I'll convert myself to an SEZ. Life is much easier that way. Today it's the other way around. It's a nuisance if I become an SEZ. So I think that is there. So in the long run, the SEZs with a special economic zone should become special manufacturing zones, high ease of doing business, minimal processes, minimal processing, and complete trust-based governance, where I actually trust whoever is doing. I mean, one of the biggest success stories in SEZ, and that includes the Tamil Nadu region, is services. And in software services exports, there is no actual checking or verification. Everything is self-declaration. Softex, am I correct? Everything is self-certification. So that's it. We can do that. And if you focus on manufacturing and then focus on services. And when we think of services, our mind is clouded by IT. It's not just IT. This budget had EduCities, medical hubs, a lot of other stuff which is there. Why can't we have them as SEZs? Because then it becomes easier for foreign patients. For a foreign doctor to come to India and practice or even do an operation in a hospital is very, very difficult. Special permissions are required. Create a medical SEZ where you can have only 30, 40 hospitals. So I think the future is bright. If you focus well, change the SEZ ecosystem in a futuristic way, I think the future is quite bright. I wish you all the best, and I hope, with Alex and the team all around him and the guidance of seniors, MEPZ will have a very bright future. Thank you very much.
Good evening, esteemed guests. It's been a wonderful evening where we've had two stalwarts of our country's administration and thought leaders enlighten us on the way forward for Indian economy, manufacturing, and MEPS in particular. While we celebrate this 43rd foundation of the day of MEPS, with the beginning of our annual lecture series, which has gone off to a flying start today, we find it an appropriate occasion to offer our gratitude to the esteemed guests who have spent their valuable time in offering us their thoughts. I would like to request our Development Commissioner, Sri Alex Paul Menon, onto the dais to felicitate our guests, please. First, we thank the esteemed Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, Sri Anantha Nageswaran, and invite him onto our dais, please. Sir. Sri Anantha Nageswaran is the Chief Economic Advisor, and he brings a unique blend of academic expertise, policy insight, and real-world management experience. Before taking office, he was a respected writer, author, teacher, and a consultant. We thank you, sir. Next, we request Sri BVR Subramaniam, IAS, to grace the dais, please. A 1987 batch IAS officer of the Chhattisgarh cadre, he was most recently the CEO of Niti Aayog, where he played a pivotal role in advancing India's development. Thank you, sir. Sir, we would request you to stay back, please, too. Sir. Sir. While we've gathered here in a celebration of our past, and while we've also spoken about the way forward and our future for MEPS, we would think it extremely important to give our thanks to a predecessor of ours and who has been a very respected part of MEPS's journey. We invite Dr. Malini Shankar, IAS, former JDC of MEPS, onto the stage, please. Dr. Malini Shankar is currently the Vice Chancellor of the Indian Maritime University. She is, in the past, served as the Additional Chief Secretary to Government of Maharashtra and as also the Director General of Shipping, Government of India. Thank you, ma'am, for being a part of MEPS's journey. Thank you. Thank you, sir. We request the Development Commissioner, Joint Development Commissioner, and the dignitaries onto the stage to for a final group photo, please. Sir? Sir, one group photo.